Hey, are you starting the live stream? All right, so welcome back, everybody, to another week, another episode of my show. I'm Jordan, and this is Taking a Different Perspective, where I talk, discuss, review, and analyze all things film and media. Now, I thought for today's episode that I would go ahead and make it like a full-blown I.C.E topics episode, because, even though within these past like 2 months or so, I may have done an I.C.E topic here and there, I feel like I haven't had an episode that was strictly catered to, me talking about some industry current events in a while. And so I thought that I would go ahead and do that today because, there's some controversial stuff that's happening in the industry. And then, of course, a lot of new trailers and things that came out, and also, as well as news. So am I good? Yes. All right, so we are going to try this again. Sorry for everyone out there on Periscope and YouTube. So, welcome back, everybody, to another week, another episode of my show. I'm Jordan, and this is Taking a Different Perspective, where I talk, discuss, review, and analyze all things film and media. So for today's episode, I thought that I would go ahead and make it like a full-blown I.C.E topics episode, because even though for the past month or two I may have done an I.C.E topic here or there, I feel like I haven't had an episode that was strictly catered to me talking about industry current events in a while. And so I thought that I would go ahead and do that for today's show, because there's some controversial stuff that's been going on, as well as a lot of new trailers and news that are out that I wanted to talk about. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this whole James Gunn controversy. This is a big hot button topic. So if you do not know who James Gunn is, he was the writer and director of a bunch of purposely made, low budget, amateur, boundary pushing B movies from a studio known as Trauma back in the 2000s. Now, besides that, he also apparently wrote Scooby-Doo 2. He was married to Jenna Fisher, aka Pam Beesly, for a period of time, but he was most notably known for being the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, or should I say was, because my man has now been fired. So what exactly happened? Well, some alt-right winger on Twitter dug up and posted a bunch of his tweets from around 10 years ago, so like 2008, 2009. Now, these tweets are pretty bad. These tweets are not pretty bad. These tweets are bad, and they are also disgusting. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, I was not personally on Twitter when the tweets first came out, like when they were first dug up. I kind of came into the whole thing in the aftermath of the situation. So I saw, well, I'm not gonna say I saw all the tweets, but I did see some of his tweets through, screenshots, and also through articles that I had read about the situation. And so I don't really feel the need to go ahead and repeat back the tweets that I read, because it doesn't feel right to me for me to do that. But so yeah, if you wanted to know what it is that he said, then I suggest you go ahead and do your Twitter and or Google searches, because you'll definitely be able to find them. But just to give you an idea of just how bad the tweets were and like the kind of things that he joked about. So he joked about like pedophilia and rape. So Yeah. Now the whole theory in regards to this whole thing is that these tweets were dug up because he is an avid online critic of the man that is currently in office. Now, whether that's true or false, it doesn't really matter, because once this became public knowledge, Disney axed my man like that. Like, the tweets came out on Thursday, and by Friday afternoon, Disney hit James Gunn with to the left, everything that you own in the box to the left. That Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, that's my stuff, and because I bought it, James Gunn, you no longer get to touch. They got rid of him like so quick. But you know, before he actually got fired, and after the tweets had came out, James Gunn had issued, of course, a series of apologies through the Twitter sphere, where he acknowledged how in the past he viewed himself as a provocateur, making movies and telling jokes that were outrageous and taboo, which he has discussed publicly many times. He also talked about how, you know, he's different than what he was, and that his days of saying stuff just to shock and get a reaction out of people are over. He has talked about how he's apologized in the past for his tweets. He also had to make a disclaimer that, you know, even though he joked about these things, he has never actually, you know, lived out the tweets that he put out. And he finished all of it by saying that he doesn't blame himself. Well, he doesn't blame his past self, but that he likes himself more and he feels like a more full human being and creator today. Now, there is a lot to this situation that, you know, I feel like I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel 100% like comfortable in talking about all of it. And I say that because, you know, I'm really trying to figure out my thoughts about this whole situation. I do find myself going back and forth on a lot of stuff. You know, I don't really have like a definitive judgment or answer to the questions that really plague this situation, but because this is like an industry current event, and because this episode is all about industry current events, I felt like I should go ahead and say something. So I pretty much view everything that I say about this James Gunn controversy more as like, you know, a stream of consciousness, where even if it may not necessarily make sense or if it contradicts, so be it. I don't really care. You know, I'm kind of on my Kanye-ish right now. So after James Gunn got fired, there were a slew of people that actually came out in support of him. You have like various celebrities and colleagues of his that came out and said that he shouldn't have been fired. You have journalists that are on his side, and then as well as the public who had actually created a petition for Disney to rehire him that I believe the last time I checked had around 330,000 signatures on it. Now, the basis for their support stems from a couple of things. But for one, they say that they were jokes. Yes, they were in bad taste, but they were jokes nonetheless. They also talked about how this was 10 years ago and that this is something that he has since apologized for. And also that, you know, Disney knew about all the stuff before they hired him. They talked about how he's a changed man, and then also brought up the fact that, you know, that we've all probably posted something on social media that we're looking back at it in retrospect, we are probably not extremely proud of. And so then, of course, it leads to the question of, does that mean that we should be punished for whatever it is that we did however many years later? You know, it's kind of like, shouldn't our bad behavior have a kind of statute of limitations on it? Now, with all that being said, I do have to say that I do get where it is that people are coming from. You know, in terms of comedy, the way that I've come to understand it is that, you know, it's meant to push the boundaries, and that, you know, it's one of those things that really allows for people you know, to really look at the world for what it is, you know, by taking those things that we maybe shouldn't joke about, or that, you know, we find disturbing or whatever, and being able to find the humor in it, or being able to find, you know, kind of like silver lining to it. Now, besides that, in terms of the whole people can change, you know, I do believe that if you've made a mistake, apologize for it, learn from it, and you know, your behavior has changed, that I don't necessarily think that you should just be like outright shunned by society, you know, after, like I said, you've changed and things like that. And also in terms of social media, right? I know that we all have something on our social medias that we're not proud of, or at the very least we did, but because we knew we weren't necessarily proud of them, we got rid of them, right? I understand all of that. However, I can't say that I support this man either. Now, I think that I have a pretty good sense of humor. I think that I have a pretty good sense of dark humor. You know, there are those things out there that, you know, maybe the average person, or, you know, the average woke person or whatever would hear, and they may not think that it's funny, but I may still be able to find, you know, some kind of value in the humor that I'm able to see in it. But I don't see, out of all the tweets that I read, I really don't find any of them funny. And I'm not saying that the people that support him find the jokes to be funny. And I also understand that, you know, I don't really have to find something funny in order for it to be considered a joke. But I just don't see how anyone who is not into that kind of stuff would think that it's okay to joke about that kind of stuff in any capacity. You know, I'm not saying that they can't, because I mean, you can go out and do whatever you want, but I do feel like there are certain lines that just probably should not be crossed, knowing the kind of weight that they hold within society. Now, in terms of the whole people can change, right, given the circumstances that I listed, I stand by it, but I stand by it to a certain extent. You know, even though you may have changed, there are, you know, it still does not negate the fact that at the end of the day, there's still going to be consequences for your actions. Even if you have learned from it, you know, that's just how the world unfortunately operates. You know, life can be pretty unforgiving in that way. Like, to give you an example, let's say you're a serial killer, right? And you went out and you were killing all these people, and then you got arrested. But then while in prison, you learned that what you were doing was wrong. You apologized for it. You found God and you changed your behavior. Now you are a new person. And then by some miraculous happenstance, you're able to get out of prison and you want to start a new life. Now, you can do that, but I'm telling you, I know for sure that I would not feel comfortable being around you. Would I actually be around you? I don't know. It's kind of like one of those, you know, things that we'll get to if I ever have to get to it. But I'm just telling you, I would not feel comfortable being around you. Now, let's take that a step further, and let's say that you were a pedophile. And let's say that all of those circumstances happen, right? And then you're able to get out of jail and you're trying to start a new life. I can tell you that if I ever have kids, they are never coming around you. That's just what it is. Like, I'm not saying that you do not get to exist in this world and that you should never have the opportunity to actually try to make something of yourself. If, like I said, you have actually learned from what it is that you did, you apologize, and you are actually a changed person. But you also have to understand that people are still entitled to feel however it is that they feel about you, especially if you've done some pretty disgusting or horrible things. And I'm not saying that James Gunn actually went out and did these things, but at the same time, I don't know that he didn't do it. So it is what it is on that. Now, in terms of the whole social media thing, right, I know that I have some things on my social media that I should probably get rid of at some point in time. But I do feel like a big difference between me and a bunch of other people, not saying all, but a bunch of other people and James Gunn, is the fact that this man was 40 years old when he made these jokes. I myself, when I got into, you know, social media, so making like a Facebook and a Twitter, I was 14 and 16, I believe, or somewhere around there. So I still had time to learn and grow. Whereas this man was 40. He was a grown man when he made these kinds of jokes. Now, granted, you know, who were we to know back in 2008 that Twitter and social media would become what it is today? But like I said, he was a grown man, so he knew exactly what it was that he was doing. And by that point, right, you know that maybe you shouldn't be talking about this kind of stuff, or, you know, you should, right? And so it makes it a bit hard for me to empathize with him in that way. Now, with all of that being said, the situation is still pretty messed up looking at it from James Gunn's point of view. And I say that because Disney knew exactly who he was before they hired him. He had already come under fire back in 2012 for some tweets of his that he had posted. And this was 2 years before Guardians of the Galaxy actually came out. Now, granted, I understand that Disney is a company that is geared toward kids. So I understand that they have a brand and a reputation to uphold. And besides that, I also know that right when this controversy had happened, this was right before a big shareholders meeting between them and 21st Century Fox that would basically finalize if they would be able to acquire 21st Century Fox. So I understand them wanting to steer clear of any kind of, you know, controversy. But like I said, they knew. Like, what it looks like to me is that you have this big company that has exploited this one little man, right? And because, you know, he was able to take this pretty unknown franchise and bring them a whole bunch of money, it's like now at this point, because, you know, all of the obstacles and hurdles are basically done with, Disney's like, okay, well, you know what, we can take it from here. You know, it's like they just basically chewed him up and spit him out as if like he didn't have any kind of value to Disney. Now, of course, that then leads to the overall question of should the man have been fired? And I honestly do not know. I mean, as I've been thinking about this more, I do find myself leaning more toward no, because like I said, Disney knew who he was before they hired him, right? And so for them to use his past against him, his past that, like I said, they do know, it's not right. But at the same time, anything with Hollywood and pedophilia and sexual assault and rape and all that kind of stuff, I'm weary of. So there's that on that. Now, of course, there are a bunch of other things that I could talk about in regards to the situation, compare it and contrast it to Roseanne. I could talk about this whole, cancel culture, and then also the fact that it was a right-wing conservative that was the one that really gave this thing its legs. But because this is an I.C.E. Topics episode, meaning plural, I want to make sure that I'm able to get to everything else. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the whole James Gunn controversy. Now, in terms of some movie news, so I'm sure that you all have heard by now that they are making a Joker standalone movie starring Joaquin Phoenix. But as of now, apparently Robert DeNiro is in talks to star in the movie as a talk show host who was instrumental in the Joker's origins. Now, I have to say that I am really, really excited that they are making a Joker standalone movie. This is something that I've been hoping that they would make for a couple of years now, and I say that because out of all of the comic book characters that I know of, and that may not necessarily be saying a lot, but out of all of the characters that I know of, he is by far the most interesting because of, what it is that he represents and how he matches with, but then at the same time really, pushes and contradicts Batman, right? So because of that, I definitely view him as, and also know that the Joker is one of the greatest, if not the greatest superhero villains to ever exist. Now, I do know that some people are a bit wary of this Joker standalone movie because I know that the Joker apparently doesn't really have like a set origin story. Like I know that there are different versions, and so they feel like because they're going to be making a movie about it, that it's going to kind of take away from his mysteriousness, even though, like I said, there are already different versions of his origin story, so this movie would just be another version. Now, besides that, I actually think that it kind of works to the movie's advantage because the filmmakers don't have, like a set story or a set guideline or, these expectations that they necessarily have to meet because, they know that there's a story that's already there, right? It's like the realm of possibility and creativity for this movie is endless. And so, I'm really interested to see what it is that they come up with this Joker movie. Now, in terms of Joaquin as the Joker, I'm not going to lie, he was not my first pick. I definitely hope that maybe Jake Gyllenhaal would have gotten it because I do think that he would have murdered that role. And if for some reason you don't agree with me, I'm telling you that you need to watch Nightcrawler, Oakjaw, and Donnie Darko. And I'm telling you, if you were to combine those three roles into one character, you would see where it is that I'm coming from. But with that being said, I am not mad at all that Joaquin is playing this character because I do know that he is a great actor. He's very chameleon-like with his roles. And I do think that, if anybody could have done the Joker character, if they could have done it any justice, it would have been him. And besides that, I'm also really interested to see his take on this character because, let's be real, but Heath Ledger is pretty much the standard for any Joker character and also just any antagonistic character in any kind of movie or story, period. So I'm really interested to see if, if Joaquin is going to crumble under the pressure, if he's really going to bring it, even though I'm sure that he will. Now, in terms of Robert De Niro being in it, I have to say that I am happy that he is taking on this role. Now, even though I wasn't alive for his heyday, right? So back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, and things like that. I do think that the De Niro name doesn't necessarily hold as much weight as it did back then. And this isn't to say that the man isn't a legend and that he hasn't had iconic roles, because he has. But when you look at the roles he's taken within recent years, I do feel like they don't really, have a ton of meaningful impact on, I guess you could say, society. But I do know that he has had some good roles, right? I know that Master of Lies was apparently really good, where he played Bernie Madoff, and I actually really enjoyed The Intern. It was that movie with Anne Hathaway. So yeah, if you ever come across it, I would say watch it. But I'm hoping that because I do have a lot of expectations for this movie because I am looking forward to it. I'm thinking, maybe this can be that role that really gives Robert De Niro, I feel like, that kind of challenge that I feel like he hasn't really had as of recently. Now, moving on to some other news, Disney's next princess movie is going to be another live-action film, but this time it centers around an African princess. So Sade centers around a young African girl who, when her kingdom is threatened by a mysterious evil force, accepts her newly discovered magical warrior powers to protect herself and her people. Now, there is currently no director that is attached to this movie, but the two women that have pitched this movie, so Ola Shakundi and Lindsay Reed Palmer, will actually write the screenplay. And it will be produced by Rick Famuyiwa, who was the director of Dope, which I think was a pretty dope movie. But yeah, in terms of my thoughts, I have to say, obviously, I'm really excited about this movie. I think with everything going wrong in this world, it is nice to see, areas of humanity that are still attempting to, progress humanity, like I said, in different ways. You know, as this actually marks the first time that an original Disney princess fairy tale is going to be led by an African character. As we all know, we had our first Black princess back in 2009 with Princess Tiana and Princess and the Frog. But I do know that a lot of people were mad about that movie because it's like, okay, we have our first Black princess, but she spends the majority of the movie as a frog. And so from what I'm gathering so far with this Sade movie, that does not look like that will be the case. So I guess, you know, you all can rest easy knowing that, at least for the time being. But yeah, I'm really going to be watching the development of this movie because, like I said, I'm really interested in it because, you know, there is no director. We don't really have a cast. I'm definitely going to be paying attention to who they choose. Because, like I said, this is, you know, the first African princess that Disney's going to have. I'm sure that, you know, there will be a ton of big names that are attached to it. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how all of that is going to go. Now, moving on to some new trailers. If you didn't know, there was a Comic-Con convention that happened in San Diego a little over a week ago. And of course, you know, there were a lot of new trailers and news and things like that that came out. So I just wanted to quickly, you know, give my 2 cents on Aquaman and Shazam. So Aquaman, I can tell you that I was not interested in seeing this movie at all. You know, my feelings, as I'm sure a lot of people's feelings were about Aquaman, are pretty much in line with how they were with Ant-Man. You know, we all really kind of view Aquaman as being a joke. We really don't take his character extremely seriously. You know, if we were to, you know, match him up or, we'll say match him up with like Batman or Superman, we honestly wouldn't feel anything wrong with just throwing Aquaman to the side. And then, I mean, besides that, when I saw Justice League, I don't really remember anything about that movie, so it didn't, you know, help or hinder my view of Aquaman. But I have to say that after seeing this trailer, I'm actually interested in seeing this movie. You know, I don't know if it was like the look or the feel of the movie or what, but yeah, I'm really interested in the fact that it's a young, hot director named James Wan that is going to be, or that was at the head of this movie. Yeah, I'm hoping that, you know, he can bring some cool and fresh ideas to DC because, as we all know, they desperately need it. Now, in terms of Shazam, I mean, I think that the movie looks cool. You know, between this and Aquaman, it looks like Disney has the possibility, okay, emphasis on possibility, to pull themselves out of their rut. But with all that being said, I'm no fool, right? I know that DC has a reputation, so I'm definitely not going into it expecting anything amazing. But I mean, yeah, like I said, it looks cool. I'm sure that I'll see it. But I do have to say, speaking a bit more broadly, I do hope that this movie doesn't necessarily start to, I guess you could say, like, bring in this pattern, right, where we're getting, you know, all these super meta, subversive, and sarcastic superhero characters. You know, we've gotten that with Deadpool. We have Ant-Man, and then apparently Thor was like that in his last movie, and now we have this. And it's like, even though I do see, you know, that whole subversive superheroes being fresh and cool, and, you know, it's something different from what we expect a superhero to be, but I do feel like, you know, if this is all the kind of characters that we're getting from here on out, that it can get old really fast. So I'm hoping that, you know, that DC and everybody that was involved with the Shazam movie can really distinguish this character from all of these other characters. Now, moving on to another trailer, Jonah Hill actually has a new movie coming out in which he was the writer and director of, called Mid-90s. It's a coming-of-age story that deals with themes of friendship, skateboarding, teenage rebellion, and brotherhood. And it was brought to us by, I would have to now say, is my favorite studio, A24 Studios. And it's really funny, I guess you could say, because I really never felt the need to distinguish, you know, my favorite movie studio before, but just looking at the kinds of movies that A24 has put out in the past and continues to put out, you know, they're definitely killing the game right now. And so whenever I see that A24 logo on a trailer or on a poster, I know that that is a movie that I definitely need to put on my list of things to watch. And this movie looks no different. Besides this being Jonah Hill's, you know, writing and directorial debut, the trailer already has me extremely interested in this movie. I love the minimalistic and realistic feel to it. I love that, you know, that they're making it look like something that was made in the 90s with that kind of grainy, noisy kind of look. And I would actually have to say that the decade of the 90s is my favorite film decade look, and I'm sure that it has everything to do with nostalgic reasons. But I do find myself gravitating even more toward movies that have that distinct 90s look to it. And so I'm glad that they are employing that with this movie. I also love that the main characters aren't well known. You know, I love seeing, you know, new faces. And so for them to be the ones that are, you know, really driving this movie, I'm really interested to see how well it is that they do. And besides that, I'm also really glad that this is a coming-of-age story. You know, I do feel like if we were to compare the coming-of-age stories of today to the ones in the 80s and the 90s, that, you know, generally what we get are like those buddy teen comedies, kind of raunchy kind of thing. And I don't know, I mean, like, they're cool, I guess you could say, but I also feel like they don't really hold that kind of emotional weight as, you know, kind of like when you compare those to, like I said, the coming-of-age stories from the 80s and the 90s. And so I do feel like the genre does need a bit of revitalization, especially in this age of increased representation. Now, even though in this movie, you know, the majority of the characters are white, so we're not really going to get that with this. But I am hoping that, you know, perhaps this movie can, you know, give the genre the much needed push into the 21st century that I feel like it deserves. Now, I also want to talk about some other news. So if you didn't know, shareholders for Disney and 21st Century Fox approved the $71.3 billion proposal to merge a good chunk of 21st Century Fox with Disney. Now, with this proposal, we are going to see the creation of what is known as New Fox, which is basically everything that Disney will not be getting. And that all includes Fox's news, sports, and broadcast businesses, whereas Disney will get all of their media assets, which include, you know, their film and TV studios. So the meeting apparently only took around 12 minutes, and I imagine that the whole thing kind of went like, you know, you had a bunch of old white guys going into a room together. They all said their hellos, they sat down, and then someone stood up and was like, okay, let's do this. And everybody in unison was like, let's do this. And then they were like, Disney and Fox on 3. And then, you know, their hands came up, and then that was just it. Like, that was pretty much it. But yeah, I don't really want to go too much into this because I do want to talk more in depth about this on a later date. But yeah, I just want to let y'all know what was going on because, yeah, Disney's takeover of the world is slow, but it's definitely happening. And this is something that's drastically going to change the industry for forever. And we honestly probably won't even really benefit from it. So yeah, there's that. Now, these last two things that I'm talking about, I had to do a kind of switch up. I hadn't planned on talking about these things because, well, these things that happened after I had finished writing this episode, but I felt like I had to say something. So I first want to talk a little bit about Power. You know, I want to give a shout out to everybody involved with Power because that episode on Sunday I felt like was one of the best, if not the best episode of the entire series. Now, even though, of course, you know, the show has its flaws, it's not the best thing that I've ever seen. You know, it's pretty good. And I do feel like this is a really, really great season. And I do feel like, you know, these episodes are getting better and better with, you know, as they go on. Now, within this episode, I wanted to give a shout out to Kendrick Lamar for bringing the acting chops. I'm not going to lie to y'all. I was a bit weary at first. Like, when I first saw him on screen, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get with this. Like, I was still seeing Kendrick, but as he really settled into the role and as the episode went on, I loved it. And I have to say that he honestly deserves some kind of nomination. So I'm guessing like it would be like an Emmy nomination. So yeah, if he's eligible for that, I would definitely say that he needs to at the very least be nominated because that was really, really good. And besides that, I mean, I would love to see Kendrick doing more acting. You know, I knew that Kendrick was a good actor, and I say that because I watched his, I believe it was like God is Gangsta video where he's like drinking and he's drunk and things like that. And even though, you know, it wasn't a movie or anything like that, I saw the potential in him. And I definitely think that he is one of those people that, you know, given the right script and given the right movie, that he could definitely win an Oscar. So yeah, I would love to see him win an Oscar. Now, besides that, lastly, I want to give a shout out to Kid Fury, who is going to be having his own 30-minute HBO comedy series, which will be executive produced by Lena Waithe. Now, I'm guessing that this is going to be like a semi-autobiographical series because just looking at the synopsis, this looks like Kid Fury to a T, even though I don't, you know, personally know him. But yeah, so this series is going to be a dark comedy which follows Greg, a 20-something sarcastic gay Black man navigating adulthood and responsibility in New York while struggling with undiagnosed clinical depression. And Kid Fury will actually serve as a writer and co-executive producer on the show. Now, I am extremely excited for Kid Fury. I have been a fan of his ever since his YouTube days. And so, you know, to see the trajectory of his career and to see where he is now, I think it's just amazing. And then, you know, to think that he's going into that sphere of making content for people on a much larger scale like HBO, I think is just, it's amazing. I honestly feel like a proud mom. Like, I really do. And then, I mean, in terms of Lena Waithe, like, she's out here grinding. You know, she's definitely someone that's out here really taking advantage of the opportunities that comes to her. I feel like this is like the 20th project that I've heard of hers that she's working on just within the past couple of months. And I just love that, you know, that she's out here using her platform to be the change that she wants to see. You know, she's not out here just waiting on roles or, you know, taking roles, not to take anything away from actors and that kind of visual representation, but she's out here making actual shows. Like, that's great. And then besides that, like, she's out here creating opportunities and roles for other people. So yeah, as you can tell, I am definitely excited for this show. You know, if this is going to be anything like what I'm already picturing, I think that this show will be really, really dope. And so with that being said, that will actually end today's episode. If you liked what it is that you heard or saw, well, I got news for you, because I do this thing every Tuesday from 12:30 to 1. Every Tuesday, like I said. In terms of next week's show, don't really know what it is it's going to be about yet. So yeah, it's going to be another surprise episode. In terms of this show, if you had any comments, questions, or concerns about anything that I talked about, please hit me up on either Twitter at JORDI Reviews or on Facebook at Jordan CHISLEY, and we can always get some conversation started. But yeah, with that being said, that will end today's episode, and I will see you all next week. All right, bye.